Okay, hopefully this will be the last piece of the Pacific Theater. July 17th, 1944. The Big Three meet for the last time. By this time, Winston Churchill has been voted out in the British general election. So you have Clement Attlee here, Harry S. Truman, and Joseph Stalin. The Potsdam Conference addresses the partition of Vietnam, okay, starting to set the stage for the future Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s. The relocation of Germans from Eastern Europe and post-war European borders. Also, results in the Potsdam Declaration, an agreement between the United Kingdom, the United States, and China. The Potsdam Declaration once again calls for the immediate unconditional surrender of Japan. Japan, of course, refuses, and World War II continues despite the victory in Europe. And then, of course, perhaps the most iconic outcome of the Pacific Theater is on August 6, 1945. The United States Air Force, a bomber by the name of the Enola Gay, drops the first atomic bomb, the Little Boy, on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. So, um, more than 70,000 people are killed by Little Boy's blast and the firestorm that followed. For a great book on the experience, I would recommend John Hersey, I believe his last name, and his account of individuals who lived through and witnessed what happened in Hiroshima on the day the atomic bomb was dropped. That book is called Hiroshima. Um, I'm just pausing to think about what to share, what not to share. Um, the dropping of the atomic bomb is a horrific event for the people who lived through it. There's a rich historical debate that goes on today about whether or not the dropping of the atomic bomb was necessary. From the time period, the U.S. Army, at some estimates, said that it would take 1 million American deaths to invade Japan to force their surrender, which was one of the biggest arguments to then justify the dropping of the atomic bomb, because ultimately, despite the horror show of the atomic bomb, it would ultimately prevent more deaths in the long term. However, on the other side of the debate and the dropping of the atomic bomb, some people point out that despite having the atomic bomb technology, that the United States did not choose to drop it in white European cities, but seemed to be able to drop it on East Asian Japanese individuals. So that debate about whether or not it was necessary is a rich historical debate that continues to this day. Now, of course, Japan does not surrender. And so 3 days later, on August 9th, 1945, at Nagasaki, the United States drops a second atomic bomb called Fat Man. These two atomic weapons that bring the world into the nuclear age and brings in a scale of human death previously unimagined in the past, well, all of human history up until this point. Um, those two bombs remain, since 1945, the only two atomic weapons that have been used on human targets during warfare. So, noticing that they are, well, that the Japanese have no way in which to resist this new horrifying weapon brought onto the world stage by the Americans. August 15th, 1945, VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day. The Empire of Japan agrees to unconditional surrender to the Allied forces. September 1945 to April 1952, the United States occupies Japan, and General MacArthur occupies and essentially runs a military government in Japan. General MacArthur in terms of his role in the Pacific, will then, of course, first take over the future Korean War and will eventually be fired in the middle of said Korean War. The government of occupied Japan reduces the political power of the emperor, establishes a parliamentary democracy and an independent civil society, which Japan again continues to have till this day. One interesting note about the military occupation of Japan and the surrender of Japan after World War II is under the guidance of the United States, because of the parliamentary democracy, Japan has a constitution. And in that constitution, which exists today still, is Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, which reads, aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order, the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or use of force as means of settling international disputes. And so, one of the most militaristic societies that has existed throughout all of world history, at the end of World War II, in its new constitution, essentially has outlawed war as a tool. The Japanese military essentially does not exist. Japan is allowed to have a home, essentially national guard of about 100,000 people, and they largely are used for things like national disasters. The Japanese Defense Force was largely deployed with the recent earthquakes in Japan, right? So that's kind of the auspice of the Japanese force, but they do not have a standing military today. And that again is a consequence of their defeat in the Pacific theater of World War II. Okay. Well, I hope you get something out of this. Frankly, it has been a nightmare to record. It is not your fault. It has been my technology's fault. So for those of you who are in Miss Walsh's AP World History, please be gentle. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this many hours ago, I hope you are kinder, of course, to me than maybe first hour would be. Okay. Stay healthy, stay safe. Talk to you later.